Olives ocean, still in motion. How could you go? Old video, innate finite, gave you quinine. I'm alright. Jello pastry, you are hasty, setting me up, taking me down. There's no will, 'cause you're a million. I'm alright. You sleep tight. I'm alright. I'm alright. I'm
Hi, my name is Kimaya Diggs, and I'm a musician, writer, and teaching artist based in Western Massachusetts. Welcome to my Black Music History series, produced for Black History Month and hosted by CouchMusic.Live. Thank you also to Valley Free Radio for sponsoring this video. So if you're just joining us, this is part 2 of a 4-part series on Black music history. Every week I'm taking 15 or 20 minutes to tackle a different topic in hopes of deepening your connection to Black history and Black music and musicians. This week our focus is on Billy Paul. If this were a TED Talk, the full title would be Self-Determination and the Double Consciousness, Billy Paul, Minstrelsy, and Black Masculinity. Today is Valentine's Day, at least in my timeline, so let's start with a love song. But not any old love song. I'm talking about lush strings, punchy horns, a dreamy atmosphere, and a voice to die for. Oh, and it's a song about a secret love affair because we are bringing the drama this Valentine's Day. I'm talking about Me and Mrs. Jones by Billy Paul. It's romantic, cinematic, and a really beautiful showcase of Billy Paul's incredible voice, which goes from murmur to full-out belt with incredible ease. Released in 1972, the song tells the story of a man who meets a woman named Mrs. Jones every day at the same cafe at 6:30 to hold hands, talk, and listen to their favorite songs on the jukebox. Now, if you're not familiar with this song, I've made a playlist that's available to the public at patreon.com/Kimaya Diggs. You don't have to be a patron to see the playlist, and it has all the songs I'll be talking about in this video series. So let's take a moment to look at the history that led up to Billy Paul and Me and Mrs. Jones. Billy Paul was born in 1934 and was a young man during the peak of the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s. He was musical from a young age. He grew up in North Philadelphia and went to music school, and at the age of 16 he shared a bill at a Philly club with jazz saxophonist Charlie Parker, which inspired him to start thinking about his singing voice as an instrument equal to the saxophone, much in the way that many jazz singers before him did, singers that he was also deeply inspired by, like Billie Holiday, Nina Simone, Nancy Wilson, Carmen McRae, and others. The scholar W.E.B. Dubois spoke about a state of double consciousness for Black men in America back in the 1890s. To quote Dubois, "It is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, this sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. The history of the American Negro is the history of this strife. He does not wish to Africanize America, for America has too much to teach the world. He does not wish to bleach his Negro blood in a flood of white Americanism, for he believes that the Negro blood has yet a message for the world. He simply wishes to make it possible for a man to be both a Negro and an American without being cursed and spit upon by his fellows, without losing the opportunity of self-development." This state of double consciousness remains the reality for many marginalized people today. For many people of marginalized identity, there is a constant tension between being true to oneself and one's culture and assimilating into white American culture effectively enough to gain the true benefits of being here. It's not just about the tension of being caught between two worlds and two cultures, although that is part of it. An essential part of the concept of the double consciousness that Du Bois wrote about is the constant self-assessment marginalized people put themselves through, of looking at themselves through white eyes and wondering if they will ever measure up in a society that does everything it can to make sure that you never measure up. So to look at pictures of Billy Paul from the 70s, we see his natural hair in a small afro. Of course, young folks in the 70s favored longer hair, in part in response to a more militaristic aesthetic favored by the generation before. But for Black people, an afro was also a revolutionary response to a society that demanded that Black people do everything they could to assimilate with whiteness, including straighten their hair with heat and chemicals. Assimilating with whiteness not only meant speaking, acting, and dressing in a certain way, but it also meant producing a certain kind of entertainment. The world of entertainment that Billy Paul was born into was the world of the minstrel show. Minstrel shows were shows performed by people in blackface, typically featuring folk songs associated with Black people, and skits performed by people in blackface that typically had characters based on Black stereotypes, such as Mammy, a big matronly nurse, Jim Crow, a foolish lazy worker, Mandingo, a sexually voracious and threatening man, Uncle Tom, a simple elderly man devoted to serving whites, and the pickaninny child, typically a wily, untrustworthy trickster girl. And as a side note, we see many tropes derived from minstrel shows in our present-day entertainment, including the welfare queen, angry Black woman, magical Negro, and more. Minstrel shows were often performed by white people in blackface, but there were also many Black performers who made a living in minstrel shows, also in blackface. This gives us a look at the concept of the double consciousness yet again. Yes, performing in blackface is demeaning and exploitative, but for many Black performers, it was an opportunity to make a living and allowed many Black minstrel performers to build up generational wealth to pass on to their children and grandchildren. Although blackface minstrel shows gradually lost popularity, the concept behind minstrel shows took longer to fade away. For many folks in northern states, including Massachusetts, especially just around the end of slavery, minstrel shows were the only exposure white folks had to Black people. White audiences were not ready for the reality of actual, factual Black people. They loved the idea of the vivacious antics of Mammy and Pickaninny on a minstrel stage, but were scandalized by real Black performers talking about injustice, the Black experience, or hardship in a jazz club. This led to the first wave of Black jazz celebrities, people who were willing to keep the race talk out of the ballroom, put their heads down, and just put on a good time show. Louis Armstrong and Dizzy Gillespie are great examples of this. Both of them are truly legendary performers and really put on a show. Dizzy Gillespie with his bulging cheeks and Louis Armstrong with his signature raspy voice, which was not actually his natural voice. It was his show voice designed to appeal to a white sensibility that appreciated his non-threatening, diamond-in-the-rough stage persona. And both of these men were extremely cautious never to talk about racial issues in the public sphere. That's not to say that they were unaware of it. Just like many prominent black musicians at the time, they had their run-ins with the police, they had drugs planted on them or on their band members, and they knew there were places where black folks could not safely tour. But they kept those thoughts largely off the record, embodying the tension of the double consciousness. If they had spoken up, could they have advanced the cause of black musicians and opened doors for many others? Yes, possibly. But in staying quiet and gaining the stardom they did gain, they opened these doors in different ways. But of course, it comes at a personal cost. The next generation of jazz musicians, the Miles Davises, John Coltrane's, and others, thought of artists such as Gillespie and Armstrong derisively as Uncle Toms, subservient black men who nodded and smiled to placate white audiences. I hope I'm conveying to you the impossible situation that this double consciousness puts marginalized people in. You can't win either way. If you stick with your folks and you speak up, then you make the dominant culture uncomfortable or downright angry. You lose your career or maybe even your life. Or you serve the dominant culture and get white accolades while alienating the people in your community who have the same struggles that you're hiding. You're asked to leave the race talk out of it because it makes audiences uncomfortable. Plus, why does everything always have to be about race? You look at yourself through the eyes of others and understand that they do not see you for who you are. They only see what they believe you should be. It's not an easy place to exist. So going back to Billy Paul, in comparison to Louis Armstrong, Billy Paul is living in a dream world. The Civil Rights Movement got the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and life is good. But of course, every young generation is compelled to seek more freedom, a little bit more space for self-determination, the ability to sit down and say, who do I want to be? How do I want to be remembered? And to know that you have the tools necessary to reach those goals. So Billy Paul builds his career on love songs, universal songs of attraction, desire, and devotion, peaking with the confessional hit, Me and Mrs. Jones. He's popular with black and white audiences alike, and Me and Mrs. Jones spends several weeks on #1, and he feels like he's finally arrived. He is successful with a capital S. So the next year, he releases the song, Am I Black Enough for You, in 1973. It's a driving song that builds on a spiritual style pattern. We're going to move on up 1 by 1, then 2 by 2, then 3 by 3 with the refrain, Am I black enough for you, getting increasingly frenzied. It is political, it is direct, and it is unabashedly black. Questlove, when speaking about Billy Paul, called him one of the criminally unmentioned proprietors of socially conscious post-revolution 60s civil rights music, paving the way for the powerful work of Marvin Gaye and Stevie Wonder. But Billy Paul's directness in Am I Black Enough for You was taken as a threat. Radio stations refused to play the song, calling it militant and aggressive, and Billy Paul's career never recovered. I encourage you to listen to the song on the playlist that I created. It's a great song for one, but it also isn't militant. It talks about working until the work is done, creating a new world, and ending poverty. But this direct confrontation of social issues was a step too far away from the subservient tropes that black performers were still expected to abide by. To go back to W.E.B. Dubois, he simply wishes to make it possible for a man to be both a Negro and an American without being cursed and spit upon by his fellows, without losing the opportunity of self-development. America refused to let Billy Paul be both a Negro and an American. The moment he spoke his truth, he was metaphorically cursed and spit upon and lost that opportunity of self-development. And refusing to fall in line and know his place, he was punished. In that moment, he looked at his lifetime of tension on the razor's edge of the double consciousness of American blackness and decided to step to one side, to stop seeing himself through white eyes and to see himself as himself for himself, a black man. After a career built on acceptable and non-threatening romantic black masculinity, his direct approach to social issues was received as a new, more threatening black masculinity, which was much less acceptable by white standards. Billy Paul continued to make socially conscious music in future years. One song that I particularly love is his version of Paul McCartney's Let 'Em In, which he remixes with snippets of speeches by Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and modifies the lyrics to reference a host of black civil rights leaders. It's also on the playlist that I made. The controversy around Billy Paul's work continued to grow, and his career never reached the heights that it had with Me and Mrs. Jones. Billy Paul is a recent figure in a long line of Black musicians grappling with the tensions of being Black in America as articulated by W.E.B. Dubois over 120 years ago. Throughout ages of positive change, the tension still exists, and we see the ugly echoes of minstrelsy in our tropes and expectations of Black performers today, in harmful tropes of Indigenous people, and in anti-Semitic tropes and characters that are part of the canon of the media that we consume daily. Thanks to Billy Paul paving the way, we have incredible art that touches directly on social issues such as What's Going On by Marvin Gaye, Living for the City by Stevie Wonder, Don't Touch My Hair by Solange, and more. We also have an incredible generation of young musicians and artists telling their true stories and making real change with less fear, more confidence, and the support to dream bigger. Thank you so much for watching this week, and to CouchMusic.Live for hosting this, and to Valley Free Radio for sponsoring. Please join us again next week at 5 for part 3 of this series. If you're interested in listening to the songs that I talked about today, please visit my Patreon at patreon.com/Kimaya Diggs. Even if you're not a patron, the playlist is available to the public and you will be able to access it. But if you are interested in more educational resources on tackling anti-racism, talking about race with the kids in your life, or you want to learn more about institutional racism and what you can do to make a difference, please consider becoming a patron. I create a monthly anti-racism syllabus that is only available there. You can also learn more about my music work at KimayaDiggs.com or on Instagram at KimayaDiggs. Thank you for watching, and see you next week.
Woman that I needed most, a saint when I was just a girl, a quiet sinner. No one saw her story told around the sun. Narrow blackened body holding all the light of days to come, with melancholy in my veins. My mind is turning and becoming light and hard to hold her, capture freer than a honeybee's. I'm sorry for the time and all the money that you spent on me. I'm sorry for the way I get unstable very easily. My balance is precarious at best. Oh mother, mother, will you come to me? My memory betrayed me. Somehow I can see her smiling, telling me to tell the world I'm tired, and so is she. The way I always acted selfish, wanted more than I would give. I hate the fact that someone like the girl I was is made to live, and now her stomach's torn and all her bones are breaking. But I know she made me love becomes a leash, and I escape. My heart is always beating slower than the slowest drum. My stubbornness is hidden in her eyes. It takes an hour to turn around and start to come. Love the things she says until I can't no more. I told her that I read a book. Really, I was kissing other boys behind the pantry door. It's perilous at best to try to tell her she should rest. The stars align and I can't see my moon. Oh mother, come to me.